This is Dr. Kim, licensed clinical psychologist and host of Love to Heal. When I say we have an incredible guest today, I really mean it. We literally have an acclaimed actress. She's known for Nickelodeon's Secret World of Mac, Freaky Friday, Babysitter's Club, and so many more. And in addition to that, she's also in the healing arts. So I wanted to bring on Natanya Ross. I'm so excited you're here with us.
Me too. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. This is so cool.
I know. I've had the pleasure, we have a lot to give you guys today, but I've had the pleasure of working alongside her at a rehab. That's how we met. And she's definitely immersed in the recovery world in addition to being an acclaimed actress. So I was wondering if you can give us a little background as to your struggles, but first, how you got into acting.
Oh man, how I got into acting. Well, I was acting my mom put me in when I was 2 years old. So by the time I was even like cognizant of the world around me, I was kind of already like a working professional actor. So it's something I just did my whole life until I was about 21, 22 years old.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so obviously there were ups and downs, like pros and cons of the acting world. Was that part of how you kind of got off track, or what was the story there?
Um, yeah, I think so. I mean, I've obviously had to put a lot of like thought into that over the years, and I think that um I lost my acting career due to drugs and alcohol, and I continued to use drugs and alcohol because I'd lost my acting career. So I think the two go hand in hand a lot. Obviously, as like a young kind of child celebrity in Hollywood, I was exposed to things at a very early age that I would not have been exposed to. So but aside from all of that, I also, really believe that a lot of it is hereditary too. So I
Hmm.
think that it was going to get me no matter what. And I think that due to my um, circumstances as a kid and the life that I led, I think it just sped it up a little bit for me.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then just the recovery process, getting into it, like, I mean, people always think it's linear, but what was that, finding the community, and like, what exactly was it that took you into a place where you had longer term sobriety?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been trying to get sober since I was 18 years old, really. That's the first time I went to a 12-step program. And at that age, that's a tough age there's so much more life to live. Like, I'm almost 40 now, right? So, like, even if I think back about the difference between a young 18-year-old girl and like kind of a getting there mature 40-year-old woman, there's so much life experience that happens in those years. So I mean I always knew that I had a problem. I don't think I recognized I was a full-blown alcoholic and addict until my mid 20s. And I wasn't able to get sober until 31 this time. So, it takes what it takes. I feel like it's kind of a battle I've been fighting my whole life, to be to be honest.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you have a massive influence on the community, especially in LA, but in Southern California in general. A lot of people, whether it's doctors or marketing experts or owners of rehabs or clients or people of relapse, the list goes on and on. This is non-exhaustive, meaning she is the go-to person in this area, in this community, where people are coming to talk about, referrals or people that need help. Families are coming to you. What's that process been like for you? Because that's got to been pretty intense.
Yeah, it's definitely intense. Like you had mentioned before, when you and I worked together. Still my favorite clinical director I've ever worked with.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'll
and the
take it.
dopest and the flyest.
Ooh,
That's
I
just
love
my
that.
hands down, gotta say that. But like at that time in my journey in working in treatment, I was it was a totally different role than what I do now. Like I was kind of in charge of the medication room and like shift supervisor and all the minutia and
Mhm.
heaviness that comes along with all of that.
Yeah.
Now, as a director of outreach and business development at a much, much larger facility, you know, my role has definitely changed. So like you said, now I'm more involved with like talking to the families, talking to the client, all of that. And it also like bleeds into my personal life too. So
Yeah.
it's a kind of a beautiful thing. You know, I have people that I grew up with acting, or my best friends or whatever it is, you know, if they have somebody in their life that's struggling or needs help, they call me, and I'm usually able to, you know, find the right facility for that person to go to. So yeah, I mean, it's rewarding, but it's heavy. And by the end of the day, I don't want to do shit. And I'm just like, don't even want to pick up the phone because I'm
Yep.
all talked out, you
Yep.
know? But I also remember that when I needed to go to treatment, somebody was there to pick up the phone and help guide me in. And I kind of feel like I have an obligation to be that person for other people. And also not forget too that like that is my profession, that's my job. So what
Yeah.
I do in the 12-step community, I do for free, right? Because
Right.
someone did that for me again in that community. And it's important, it's an obligation I have in both worlds that I take very seriously.
Yeah. Well, pause. First of all, congrats on being a director of business development at a residential treatment center. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
thank you so
Uh,
much. Yeah.
so okay, so tell us a little bit, because not everybody knows what's entailed with being a part of that community, 12-step community. Like, do you speak still? Do you have like sponsees still? What does that look like?
All of that stuff, you know, and as life gets bigger, you know, it's, you start to drift away a little bit, and then you have to kind of put yourself back in check. And but yeah, so I'm still sponsored. I still have the same sponsor that I've had for the last, I think, almost 6 years now. I'm almost 8 years sober. I still sponsor 4 people. I speak often, probably like it turns out to be about once a week. I have a commitment at a meeting still, and I try and, you know, stay as vigilant as I can when it comes to my own personal recovery, because if I'm not okay, I can't be there for other people too. So I have to remember that like Natanya has to be okay first in order for her to help other people. But if I'm not helping other people, most likely I'm not going to be okay. So I kind of just remember all of that stuff um and apply it to my recovery.
It's so cool. You get schooled really quickly on the recovery community and how much they actually are experts at self-care. They're also experts at staying connected. I mean, these are skills that like some people have to take decades to build.
Yeah.
And luckily that's all built in to your community, to the 12-step community, and it's reinforced. And that is just the most beautiful thing. It's like, it's almost like all of the prongs of happiness we talk about, like contentment, are actually just built into this community. So it's
Yeah,
all there
I
if
agree
you
with that.
access.
Yeah, that's a good
That
point.
it's just incredible.
Yeah.
So it all just continues to be the thing that like I guess you would agree that is most likely going to be the protective factor if you're in
Yeah.
that community.
Yeah. I
Obviously, there's alternatives, but I don't see anything that's better still to this day. Do you?
No, I mean, I really don't. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
the 12 step, I mean, and the 12-step community and the treatment community are obviously two different things, but the
sure.
12-step community does definitely teach you, you know, the value of incorporating a spiritual foundation into your life. And I think working in the treatment field, you know, it is very much ingrained into you, like, take care of yourself, self-care, self-care, so you don't get that burnout that everybody talks about, you
Yeah.
know?
You know, a lot of people that are listening are actually going through breakups. It ended up being something where people just continue to request that topic from me. And it's clinically underrated a lot of times, but it's clinically significant. And I wanted to know from your perspective, like, have you seen with clients or people in the community have breakups, or yourself, whomever, and has that been a risk for relapse, a significant one? Do you have any stories about that or
Yeah.
anecdotes?
Oh
Mhm.
yeah. For sure. And I totally agree with you. It's completely clinically underrated. I think that the wound from a breakup is one of the most traumatic things a human being can experience
Mhm.
in this lifetime.
Mhm.
And I know you and I are a lot alike in the way that, like, you know, our love languages and our heart space and all of that. So, like, yes, I have been in love, you know, quite a few times in my, you know, short, but what feels like so long of a lifetime.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have seen sponsees go through a breakup and relapse over it. I have seen clients in the treatment facility completely go against clinical advice and get into that relationship and with that other person and this rehab, and now all of a sudden they're on a run to, I mean, I've seen all of that shit. And then me personally, you know, which is why I love that you said it's clinically underrated, is, you know, so I would always see my girlfriends go through breakups and stuff like that, and they'd say, well, you know, I'm suicidal, I want to kill myself, and I just never understood it. I was like, you what, over a guy? Like, give me a fucking break, you know, pardon my language.
Oh, you can speak, like, you can do that here.
So
it's uncensored here.
Yeah, my boyfriend, you know, we've been together, it'll be 5 years in January, but we did have a breakup. We had a breakup for about 3.5, 4 months. And it was just kind of building and building. And it was one of those really heart-wrenching breakups because both parties still loved each other, but the relationship wasn't working. And what I can't, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but what I came to find out through the process of going through that is that at least for me, it wasn't working because I hadn't grown at all in a couple years spiritually. I had become so stagnant because I made this guy my whole life, and I became that girl that I used to be like, I would never do that. That's not me. That's not my vibe. Like, I don't get down like that. And I did, and that's where I ended up. So when you make somebody your whole entire life and they can't quite, you know, give you what you think you need, when really what you need is like the internal love. When that breakup happens, it's the most devastating thing. So, you know, we broke up for a few months, and I was in the fetal position for weeks, but I have pride and I have a huge ego, you know, so I was like, I'm not letting that motherfucker see this, you know. So I did the block on Instagram and Facebook. You don't get to see my life, like that whole thing. And really I was dying inside, and I'm so grateful that I have the kind of friends that I have in my life and my sponsor. But what happened for me, I was at a, you know, a length and a point in my sobriety too, where like picking up a drug or a drink, that was not an option for me. But, and here we go again, clinically underrated. What happens to somebody's mental stability in that kind of a traumatic experience is, one, someone can also be like triggered with a trauma response too, of like an abandonment issue from childhood or whatever it is. And all of a sudden you're just like cracked wide open. And for me, it was an opportunity, you know, one, to let God lead me through whatever I was meant to be experiencing at that time. And two, to have a really deep understanding that I really forgot who I was. You know, I really forgot who I was. And I woke up one day and I said, you're Natanya fucking Ross. Okay. And act like it, and know that, and love, figure out how to love yourself again, figure out how to tap back into that self-worth and that self-confidence. And the ironic thing is it, almost the second I like really tuned into that, like to the point where like I could even feel the vibrations of the universe, you know, when you're just like walking down the street and the wind like catches your skin, and you're like, yeah, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. So I had really like honed in on everything, and I was like back in love with myself in a very healthy way and all of that stuff. You know, of course he reached out. That's how it always happens.
That's how it works. So you had a full identity. You had a full identity. You were feeling good. And that's when he was able to come back around. And luckily he was in a good, healthy place to be aligned with you.
That's right. And it's been an entirely different relationship since then, but not so much because like we don't do anything it's all the same, but I was different, right? Like I was different, and I was no longer afraid of losing him because God had already kind of granted me that experience of knowing what it's like. So I could come back into it knowing that if my greatest fear was losing this man and not knowing if I was going to be okay or not, that's off the table. I lost him once. I was fine. I figured it out. So now I could kind of come back in, and what changed was I allowed myself to be 100% Natanya, good, bad, indifferent. And I was no longer, you know, because before I was kind of like, I wanted to do everything perfect and I wanted to look perfect all the time and this and that. And like, no, I'll stay home and cook and take care of the dog and all this stuff. And then I was like, you know, there's let me just show you exactly who I am. 'Cause if we're gonna be together forever, you got to know who that girl is.
Yeah.
And I did that through the process of like learning who I was again and falling in love with that person in total. Not just like the good, not just the pretty parts of me,
Right.
but loving the darker parts of myself as well.
I love that. And that, yeah, that is more spiritual, but it also connotes confidence, which is obviously the number one attractor. But that really showed. Now, another thing that I've seen from the outside perspective of your relationship is the self-expansion part, where you two are both ambitious, and one of the key factors for a relationship lasting a long time is not only being spiritual, but it's also self-expansion. So you guys both being each other's cheerleaders, that can actually be like one of the biggest factors why you could last a lifetime. So,
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
but that's major because you guys are both extremely talented and ambitious. So that's a
Well,
big deal that you're both rooting for each other because that doesn't always happen.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's true. And there are definitely times where we have to switch off. I mean, there's some months where my acting stuff or work stuff is just like popping, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting that hype or that buzz or whatever. And
Yep.
then the next month he's on a top 10 chart of some Americana music chart somewhere, or
Exactly.
Rolling Stones doing a feature on him, and I'm like, okay, I'm not, it's not all about it's not all about me. And I sometimes I'm like happier in the moments where like it's about him,
Sure.
which is
Yeah.
different for me. That's a,
Oh.
I think that's where I really realized how deep my love for him went, was
Right.
like I was as excited for him about his stuff, even more so than my stuff, because it felt like our stuff.
Yeah.
Regardless of whose it was, it felt like ours. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you can get this over audio, you know what I mean, when they're at the podcast, but I encourage you to watch the video version of this because this woman is extremely enigmatic. And there's just something about the way you tell your stories. It resonates with massive amounts of people. I remember watching. I think there's a not judgment to it. And then you're an actor, so you had this like natural charisma. And then you have the speaking skills. So it's just like, it's a really cool combination to watch, like whether you're working with this person or you're just watching her speak, but very enigmatic. And thankfully you have those skills because you needed
Thank
it to
you.
inspire
Yeah,
other people. Well, it's
thank you. That
there.
means a lot.
Yeah,
Because there was definitely a time in my life where no one wanted to hear anything I had to say. They wouldn't even pick up my phone calls. So, that means a lot to me to hear. It's yeah, it really does mean a lot to me.
Can we get to the dark place a little bit? Because
Yeah.
for me, you are an expert in a lot of areas. So as a psychologist, I need to come to some people that are experts in different areas, and I'm a constant, perpetual learner. And there is a dark space that I don't think I'll ever understand, but I want to understand it better intellectually. There's a research study that came out from the University of Zurich, and it actually stated that people who regularly use cocaine struggle to feel empathy, and they don't enjoy social interactions as much. So they're not enjoying it when people are reaching out, and they're showing a lack of regard for other people. So what does that tell me? What it feels like to me is like, I don't know if this person is caring. So
Yeah.
now, did everything you did when you weren't using as much, was that even real? Like, do you have a heart? And you start questioning
Right.
as a family member, as a friend. And it's good for me to affirm and reaffirm that with studies. But from your perspective, like, what do you see as far as like the isolation? What is that about? And why is there so much lack of regard on that
For
side?
other people. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting as you were saying all that, because I was even just thinking about the difference like of cocaine and heroin just as a chemical
Use and
substance. Like,
form. Mhm.
yeah, the difference of the effect produced, number one, and maybe the difference in like personality that comes out when somebody is inebriated on these substances. I think that I'll speak for me
Please.
as someone who's a former heroin addict. It's interesting because I feel like I continued to do that drug over and over and over. One, obviously physical dependence, but two, because I did care so much, because I did feel so much,
Yeah.
that for me, it like allowed me to not care and feel as much, right? And I think with cocaine, it removes certain inhibitions to where, like, you know, people do act out and act like a bitch or an asshole or whatever, right? And at least for me with heroin, the isolation pieces is, you know, you, no matter what kind of life you have, whether you were, you know, a grade A student in high school or a successful actor or just an average kid, whatever it is, you know, to go from something like that and then all of a sudden be an IV drug user, like, that's a hard hit, right? And you get to a point with addiction where you are so immersed in that lifestyle, no matter where it takes you, even if it's just straight alcohol and you're at the local bar every night till 2 o'clock, whatever it is, you don't really want people to see you like that, you know? And that's why they say in AA a lot too, that it's like, it starts out as fun and then fun with problems and then just problems. And you know, the truth is for the first 5-6 years of my partying, it was all social. It was only social. And then, you know, as it gets darker, as you start to delve into the darker pockets of your brain and, you know, fortunately or unfortunately find that one substance that quiets it long enough for you to like breathe in the world, that breath becomes more important than anything else. And I say a lot too, I think at the end of my addiction, my drug of choice really became silence, you know, because like not just silence from what you're saying, but like silence from what this is saying too, what my brain is saying. So yeah, it's tough. And I think that's where the isolation piece comes into. And then physically, like aesthetically, people deteriorate so rapidly with cocaine, crack, meth, heroin, whatever it is, that I think, you know, at a certain point, there's a comfort in knowing that like you don't have to really reveal yourself to the world like that, you know?
I mean, I couldn't have listened to a better description of that. And it's comforting just to hear, because you're around it and you know, intellectually we know like they're going to isolate. Of course, they feel potentially ashamed, or they're just bothered, like you said, by the ruminations or judgment. They don't need judgment. They don't need the social interaction. Maybe they're soothed, but it's so comforting to hear that from your perspective. Like, how rare is it that we actually get that insider scoop? And it's hard to ask people, and I can only ask people that have known you, and you're so open. Like, what a comfort. But it's like,
and also I think too that like, especially when someone's pretty deep in their addiction, like, you know, at a certain point it becomes like a maintenance, right? So it's not like you're getting that crazy high like when you first started using it. So I also think that like the moments of using, like the entire process all the way through, like cooking, whatever, I'm not going to even get into all of that, those become precious moments, right? So another piece of the isolation, I think, is that, you know, you're going to lose 10 seconds of this thing that your entire life is based around if you have to deal with person X or person Z talking to you, or God forbid asking you for some of your drugs, or trying to fuck you, whatever it is, that you're just like, no, I'm good right here. Let me just savor every second of my like really hopeless, dark, depressed life, you know?
One way I probably need to challenge this irrational thought is that I did put you on a pedestal because when you disclosed to me that you did some things that were benevolent, philanthropic while you were using. And I have to say, when I hear stories like that, it confuses me. Like, but I guess, you know, we're complex creatures. So, I mean, just because in a moment someone's philanthropic doesn't mean they're not, you know, dodging someone's call the next. So can you speak to that? I mean, are you just angelic and you just were able to hold that? Was it difference between the drugs?
No, I mean, you know, I like to think my career in being philanthropic was more so in my sobriety. You know, it's really where like something again cracked open in me, where I thought like, you know, I want to do what I can to like help the world, like not just inside of a 12-step program. I want to go out there in the world. And to me, the homeless community was always the thing closest to my heart. And my boyfriend can attest to the fact that like, I mean, we could be watching a television show, and if some kid is being bullied, I'm like in tears, and I'm like, that's it. We gotta be big brothers and big sisters at this. I mean, it's, you know, so that's always been part of my heart.
Yeah.
And even in the darkest times of my using, I think that I always had a good heart, thank God.
Mhm.
And even though I had to do things to maintain my addiction, I was always like, if someone asked me for help, I always still did it,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it wasn't a lot of people because we didn't really have a lot of people around us at this
Yeah.
time. But, um, you know, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's just how God
Were
made
you
me.
helping people that were also in that community and maybe like you weren't helping like family members? It was just whoever was in that little world? Or
Yeah,
did that
I mean,
apply?
at that time, and later on in life, I found out I was adopted, but at that time, there's no family members. So it was just me and my mom. There's no brothers, no sisters, no father, no uncles, no grandparents, nothing. Just me and my mom. And, and she really wanted nothing to do with me at that time, which is understandable. So I think when I say that, like, it would be like some other little girl on the street that was like crying in the corner. Like I would, are you okay? You know what I mean? Like, no, of course she's not okay. You're not okay either. Like,
Right.
but to have that kind of like, even if it's a 5 second solitude with somebody when you're in that kind of a lifestyle, it means a lot. It means a lot. So
Yeah. Can we speak to your program of Feed the Homeless and also like where you where you were at the time? Because it's kind of like it's a pretty epic part of the story and like what you're doing now.
yeah, so at one point my addiction took, I kind of got lucky because I had these two guys with me the whole time. One had been one of my best friends since I was 13 years old, and at this time we were engaged. So we had this love affair on and off since we were kids. And so we were together and we were engaged throughout this process of like gnarly heroin addiction. And then I had my other ex-boyfriend there with us too. So it was like the three of us always together. So it got so bad we ended up living in the car for a year, and then we just moved down towards Skid Row, and we lived off of like a mini Skid Row. It was like behind, it was like a mini Skid Row, and we moved into a crack motel where I think the rent was like $400 a month, and there's one bathroom for each floor, and there's prostitutes and drug dealers, and it was dangerous and crazy, and like all we had was each other at that time. And well, where am I going with this? What was the
Feed the
question?
homeless.
Feed the homeless. Thank you. So we had nothing. We had no money. And I remember one thing, I think it was Thanksgiving or Christmas, one of the guys was like, we have to go down to the food bank. And I had already been an addict for a little while. We had been down there for a little bit. And the thought of like standing in a line to get free food and maybe socks or toiletries was one of the most like demoralizing things I had ever been through. I panhandled for years at gas stations, like, do you have $5? Do you have $5? Whatever it was. And like I was a very well-known child actor in the
I
90s.
know that's a major component of this story. Exactly.
It was crazy, like to be part of pop culture like that.
Yeah.
And then, to be told like, listen, I know it's Christmas, but we got to go to the food bank. So those moments always had such an impact on me that like when I was sober enough this time, I wanted to try and have that kind of an impact on somebody else's life. So I remember many times being almost like pretty much homeless downtown, even though we had this like shitty ass room to live in. I mean, thank God, if it wasn't for that room, I don't know what would have happened to us. But and someone would hand me a sandwich or a bottle of water because I looked disgusting. I looked homeless. So people were just like, here, do you want this? And or when someone would take the time to like smile at me, even though like my face was like half picked off and my hair was in dreads and haven't showered and and someone took the time to just smile at me, like that changed my day. Like that, I'll never forget that kind of stuff. So when I started Feed the Homeless, I was just kind of driving around the San Fernando Valley and I was like, damn, there's a lot of homeless people out here in this area. And everybody, I think, always focuses on downtown LA and Venice and Santa Monica and stuff like that. And though we cover all of those places too, but I also wanted to make sure that there was somebody filling the need for the homeless population in San Fernando Valley. So I just got a couple friends together, and I'm a really firm believer in, like, when people say like, well, you're just one person, you can't do shit. And I'm like, that's not true, because I can inspire that person, and then that person, and then they inspire two more people, and now all of a sudden we have this group of people who are down to like provide a meal and some hope to somebody on the street, right? So that's just how it started. It was like me and 10 people the first time, and we raised like $150. We fed, I don't know, 20, 30 people. And now we're at like 7 years later, and every event now we feed thousands of people, and we raise thousands of dollars. And it's been a bummer throughout COVID, because part of the events that I put together for Feed the Homeless, I also incorporate 12-step community, so the newcomers in that community can have an opportunity to be of service and see how important that is to give back to others. And because I didn't want to mess with like the integrity of how the events have been set up thus far, it's like 200-300 people show up sometimes, and you can't do that right now during COVID. But now things are getting better, so I have to get creative and figure out how we're going to keep this going. But throughout COVID, I teamed up with this girl on the west side. Her name's Bella Baskin, and she has this amazing foundation called Blessed Bag. It's these bags that she puts together for the homeless. They have almost everything you can think of that someone would need on the street to survive for like a couple weeks in the bag. So we donated our reserve to her so she could, buy more bags and make them. And then I did a candle, like a paid partnership candle collaboration with somebody over the pandemic as well, where she used my image on one of the candles, and then Alex Mack on another candle. Yeah. And we donated 20% of the proceeds to Blessed Bag also. So yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to figure out something. I don't know. It's hard though.
So beautiful. I love it. I love it. I could listen to that all day.
Yeah.
Okay. So just practically speaking, like, let's say someone's a family member or a friend, like, what are a couple of things they could be doing? How often should they be contacting the person that's deep into the addiction, or should they not? Who should they be reaching out to? Like, what are some things that come to mind as far as what you would do in that moment, knowing that the other person doesn't want to be called out, but knowing that they're in it?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. I think that like one intervention is always like, go for it, right? Like if we've reached like crisis situation with a loved one, and crisis situation with a loved one, and like it is apparent that this person needs to be intervened on,
Right.
I think that you should always try at least once, right? But like, as you and I both know, no one's going to get sober if they're being forced to by somebody else. So, and I work with a lot of different interventionists, and oftentimes the intervention isn't successful the first time, and I was just literally talking to somebody about this before I got on with you. It also depends on the people around the identified addict, right? And like, are they going to hold true to those boundaries that they're saying, if you don't get treatment, these are our boundaries, you get to choose, but like these are the consequences. And does the family stick to those boundaries? I don't know. I mean, how often should you call? I don't know. I don't. And I guess this is why I'm not a clinical person, and why I kind of never went down that road, is because that stuff to me is so heavy. Like, I don't have a good answer to that.
Well, the reason I ask you is because it's true. Like, actually, you're speaking to the main point, and the main point really is they actually need it when they want it, when they're ready. We can try to intervene, but sometimes it's like, I tried rehab because I was forced to, and I didn't really think it worked. I mean, so that can even like go the other way. So it's like, it's really best if they're in a dark place, in my opinion, if the consequences are dire.
Gotta hit a real solid bottom, I mean, my mom did not, she sent me to rehab the first time, and then after that she was done, so every time I've gotten sober after that, including this time, I figured it out for myself. That might have saved my life. I don't know. I also, when I hear parents and they're like, I can't turn his phone off, it's my only way to know he's okay, or I have to pay his car payment, it's the only way I know he has a place to sleep, or he banged on my door at 3 o'clock in the morning saying someone was going to kill him. I had to, and I get all that. I'm not a parent, but like,
Right.
I get that, you know? So, and I also never want to be the person to advise someone like, don't take the call tonight. If he calls you, don't pick up the phone, and God forbid that person passes away. And then the parents like, you robbed me of my last chance to talk to my kid. I don't know. It's like, it's so dicey. It's so layered and it's so dicey.
It is, and it's so individualistic, and that's exactly what us as therapists would say the same thing. We're not going to advise. We're going to give you like the options, but ultimately you got to do what feels good, because you got to look into the future. Like, if I didn't do this, would I feel bad?
Right.
If I do this, like, so that's why you're right. Like, what ends up happening is they experiment with different things. You know, they get kind of tired of reaching out, or they get tired of giving money or whatever it is. And that's at the point where they kind of naturally just start pulling back. Some people, they just feel like if they don't continue giving the whole time, that they're just going to regret it. It just depends on.
It's really, I know it's a really fucked up thing, because I heard somebody say once, like, if you baby them, you bury them, which goes into the enabling, like how much is too much, how far is too far. I don't know. I've also never really been in a position where I have that person in my life. Like, I'm usually that person, right? And even in sobriety, I think I've had such good and strong boundaries that, like, you know, I don't know that anyone would even get into my life where I would have to like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't.
So that speaks to the boundaries. And like, one way you found that out was, I would imagine, 12-step, or just living life and learning about the process. But boundaries is good. And so one way they actually get into it is Al-Anon. So they start learning boundaries and connecting with other people that are having family members. So definitely check out Al-Anon, you guys, if you.
Al-Anon, Al-Anon is a huge resource. Another 12-step program for the identified loved one of an addict. But also too, I think a lot of people go to Al-Anon and figure out that they have some major codependency issues and maybe even some other addictions that are underlying that they might not know about too. Like, there's addictions to food and gambling and sex and shopping and all of these other things that maybe you're like doing because you just got to get out of your head long enough to not think about your loved one that's on the street like shooting up. So it's all, you know, human beings are such beautifully complicated creatures.
They are,
you know,
well,
like,
we answered this correctly, because there is no answer. Like, there's tools, like there's 12-step, there's Al-Anon, there's individual therapy. If you're the person that's struggling with the addiction, what we probably would recommend is trauma therapy, like EMDR, and 12-step. There's obviously so many other tools. So, you know, it's whatever works for you. That's why we used to do sample platters for people, because there'd be so many different groups, so many different types of people coming in. You never know who's going to resonate with you. And the style, the way that information is conveyed, or the person that's conveying it, like, might resonate or may not.
Yeah, it has to be individualized. Everybody, there's no, you know, we're all snowflakes, right? Like, everybody is a different person. So what I might need is totally different than what person X might need.
So if someone's relapsed, or they're really dark into an episode of addiction, what's something that they could do? I mean, even just practically speaking, should they access online groups right now for 12-step?
So Alcoholics Anonymous is completely you know, and so quickly, it was like such a proud moment where I was like, wow, they just, you know, figured it out so fast. It took me like months to figure out Zoom. I'm like, what the hell? You know, I'm not like a computer person at all. So yeah, pretty much every meeting there is that was in person is now online. And you can go to the AA. Well, I guess, you could call your local AA office and they'll provide you with the Zoom codes. I think if you go to AA online, I'm sure it has a directory of like all the Zoom codes and all of that. Excuse me, I have hiccups. And then also, you know, I always say that if there's a trusted person in your life that you can talk to, do it, reach out. Because like, when you start talking about stuff, it takes the power out of it, right? But when we internalize everything and hold it all in, it's like, you know, it's almost like you're using it like a bulletproof vest or something. But it's not like, that's not the thing that's going to like protect you from the bullets, you know. It's so talk to somebody that you trust. And you know, if you feel like you do want to check out a meeting, you can keep your camera off. You can do it however you want. If you're drunk and or loaded, still go. I say that every time I speak in AA, like if you're loaded right now, welcome. Like we understand, we get it, and we want you to be here. Don't disrupt the meeting, obviously, but like be here with us, because this is where, you might belong. So yeah, just log on. You can keep your camera off, or you could turn your camera on and raise your hand to share and say, hey, I'm killing myself slowly and I need help. And I guarantee you that every person in that Zoom meeting will inundate you with messages and like, here's my number, call me, call me, call me. And you'll instantly find a support group of people, because, people need each other. No matter how much you try and say you don't need anyone, or you love to isolate or whatever. And we all have, like, I was stoked at the beginning of the pandemic. I'm like, boom, been training for this shit my whole fucking life, And then a couple weeks in, I'm like, no, I'm not good at this. So reach out to somebody that you trust and talk to them. And yeah, I mean, something that simple could help save your life. And that's true.
Yeah, that's just so well said. And I think, what's kind of hard for people, the family members and the friends, is that, the red flags are there. Like, people aren't stupid. Like, they don't have to be seasoned drug users to know there's like problems. And even if you think that they don't know, they still know that you're not around. They still know you're probably not feeling confident. They still know you're probably depressed, or you're probably anxious, or maybe you're not functioning that well. I mean, that part's hard to hide. So regardless if you think that they think you're not using, that's not really the point. Who cares about that? If they love you, they're not judging you. They just know that something's off, so forget the judgment for a second. Like, I think people tend to think that they're being judged even when they're not. But there's so many reasons why someone would want to stay by themselves, as you clearly and beautifully illustrated during that.
Yeah.
So you have a life that is very full, and I imagine there's obviously some distressing times. You have a lot on your head. Your career as an actor and as a director of business development has to be really full of all kinds of things and all kinds of layers. How do you keep yourself? What's your routine? Like, how do you keep yourself content?
Yeah, I mean, I think it changes, it constantly evolves, and something that like was working for me last year doesn't necessarily work for me anymore this year. And I try to just honor that process and be very compassionate with myself. And there's years where I'm like, damn, I am killing it, And then there's like this last year, I look back and I'm like, did I do as much as I think I did, and so I try and honor that whole process. And for me, I mean, as I get older too, I think some more of the simple things in life are really what has become my joy, as opposed to like all of this other shit I've chased, since I was a kid, thinking that that was what was important. And, the moments where, it's a Friday night and I'm home in this, we don't own a home yet, but we have this beautiful apartment we've created together where it's just like a very equal and like cool mix of like his style and my style, and it's filled with love and light and warmth in this home. And and my best friend's coming over in a little bit and we're gonna watch a movie, and it's like, wow, damn, like people take that kind of stuff for granted. So like I try to remain very grateful about the obvious stuff, and then the not so obvious stuff too, right? Like, also my spirituality practice changes, sometimes day to day, sometimes year to year. So I try to tap into what makes me feel good. And, I'm very into essential oils, and lately I've been like very called to the more like tree oils for whatever reason. And I'm not a nature girl at all by any means. I'm like an indoor spa girl, or like a very like late dinner with like correct mood lighting. But I am spiritual, and something lately for me has been to like tap into the smells and what it feels like once it's kind of like getting through my skin into my body, of essential oils that are all from Mother Earth, and then crystals, always, and 12 step, and the look on my dog's face when I come home and he hasn't seen me in a while, and the sponsee who has suddenly changed overnight and has this big beautiful life, and you're like, whoa, all of those things, the reminders, the synchronicities, the like, oh, I haven't talked to Dr. Kim in a while, and then like there you are on my phone texting me, like stuff like that, to like keep my eyes open, and to keep my eyes open to that kind of stuff, and I'm fucking lucky. I have a really full life, and I'm like a kid who used to shoot heroin on Skid Row when no one would take my phone calls, and now a lot of people call me for a lot of different things, and none of that is lost on me, and I'm incredibly grateful for all of that. Like, so and all of that is part of my spirituality, like all of it, and then also too, if I need to just check out and watch Housewives all night long, I'm doing it.
Love it.
If one day I wake up and I'm like, that's it, I'm only doing my pressed juice today and my fancy water from Erewhon and my salad, my chopped salad, and very healthy, that's what I'm gonna do. And if the next day I'm like, this is what I need today, is this thing that like my head tells me I'm an asshole for eating, but I'm really not, like, I do that. I just kind of honor it, and I think that comes with age. I really do. Where you're like, listen, you only have one life to live here, and like, I'm just going to do the best that I can every single day, and like be kind to myself in the moments where I really don't feel like I hack it,
Yeah. Listen, I have to tell you, you've had a major influence on my career and my life in general. And I'm a better clinician and a better person because I met you. And there's not a lot of people I can say that about. But I just really wanted you on because I know you're going to impact so many people with this interview. And I'm so excited you came on.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. And I feel the same way about you too. Like we met each other in a time in my life where I was like, kind of, what is it, like a moth to a butterfly, like I was still in that little like cocoon phase. Am I saying it right? I don't know. Yes, and like one wing was like kind of coming out, the other wing was like kind of coming out, and you were like, let it all out, bitch, because you got it. Like, you are that bitch.
You really are. Oh God, I'm so glad you got that message from me because that's what
I did. And you helped me, get out of a situation that I have a tendency to kind of like, whether it's a job or relationship or whatever it is, like if I'm comfortable, regardless if I'm being pushed to be better, but if I'm just comfortable because I know how to do it like the back of my hand, I have a tendency to just kind of stick it out because sometimes, that's easier to do in life, and I was in a situation that was very toxic and very unhealthy for me. And had it not been for you, I don't know that I would have believed in myself enough to be like, you're right, I can go be whatever I want to be in the world. And a lot of that was because of you. So you made just as much impact on my life, my friend, just so you know.
Well, you're amazing. I love you. And
I love you too.
Please tell them how they can find you.
So yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's just at Natanya Ross. So NATANYAROSS. I have a Facebook fan page, same thing, Natanya Ross. And yeah, and then like, you could just kind of pop on Hulu one night and check out an episode of something. You never know, I'll probably be in it.
Yeah, search her up on Netflix. There you go.
Yeah. And I have I'm in the process right now of writing my memoir.
Are you serious? Okay,
yeah.
So exciting.
Yeah. So I have a ghostwriter or a co-author really, and and yeah, our projected end goal for completion is around 9 months to a year from now. So
well, yeah, you heard it first. I cannot wait. Like that, I'm like jumping out of my skin right now. So
yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting. That's for sure. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, well, I'm not going to take any more of your time. This has been extremely beautiful, spiritual, and impactful. And thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. I love you.
Love you.
Okay, bye.